The single shot that ripped through the Willow Creek saloon wasn't just loud, it was an ending. And for Savannah Brooks, it was also a beginning. She was wiping down the bar, the smell of stale beer and regret thick in the 1876 Wyoming air. Her hands were shaking, not from the gunshot, but from what came before it. The sheriff had finally slapped iron cuffs on Frederick Daniels, the man who had hunted her for months, the man who had turned her life in St. Louis into a walking nightmare. He was in a cell. He was locked away. But the bars on his cell couldn't lock away her memories. A deep voice cut through her thoughts. "You look like you need something stronger than that rag." Savannah jumped. A stranger stood on the other side of the bar, a tall silhouette against the flickering lantern light. His hat cast a deep shadow over his face, but she could see his eyes. They were kind, and they seemed to look right past the tough facade she'd spent months building. "I'm just fine, sir," she said, her voice tighter than she wanted. She straightened her shoulders, a reflex she'd learned the hard way. "What can I get for you?" "Whiskey," he said, placing his hat on the scarred wood of the counter. He had dark, curly hair. "Name's Isaac Blackwood." She poured the drink without looking at him. Men's kindness was a currency, and she didn't have anything left to pay with. She'd learned that lesson in blood and tears. "You're new here," Isaac said. It wasn't a question. "Been here 3 months," she clipped out. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving her. "That's brand new by Willow Creek standards," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Around here, 3 generations on the same piece of dirt barely makes you a local." She felt the corner of her own mouth twitch. He wasn't wrong. The town was a strange mix of weary suspicion and stubborn pride. The last of the drunks were stumbling out into the night. The piano had gone silent. The only sounds left were the clinking of glasses and the low murmur of a losing card game in the corner. "You planning on staying?" Isaac asked into the quiet. "Haven't decided," she answered, and it was the honest truth. With Daniels locked up, she could go anywhere. But every direction just seemed to lead back to a different kind of pain. There was nothing for her back east. And out here, she was just a barmaid with a past she couldn't outrun. "This town could use someone like you," he said, his voice low and serious. "Someone who keeps to herself, but sees everything." Her head snapped up. "You don't know a thing about me." "I know enough," he said, his gaze steady. He finished his drink in one smooth motion. "I know you came here running. I know you work harder than anyone in this place, and I know you don't let any of these fools get close." "You're awfully observant for a man just passing through," she said, her voice laced with ice. "Who said I was passing through?" He smiled, a real smile this time, and it changed his whole face. "I've got a small ranch, 10 miles out. It's not much, but it's mine." Before she could think of a reply, the saloon doors crashed open so hard they slammed against the inside walls. The sheriff stood there, his face pale and grim. He wasn't looking at the room. He was looking right at her. "Daniels escaped," he barked, and the world fell out from under Savannah's feet. "Knocked out my deputy. Stole a horse." The sheriff took a step closer. "You need to be careful, Miss Brooks." The glass she was holding slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Everything she had started to build, every fragile hope she'd allowed herself to feel, it was all turning to dust. "When?" she managed to whisper. "Not 20 minutes ago," the sheriff said. "My men are out looking, but he's got a hell of a head start." Isaac was on his feet in an instant. His easygoing manner was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. "You need a safe place to stay," he said to Savannah. It wasn't a question, it was a command. "I have a room upstairs," she said automatically, her mind reeling. "A room everyone in this town knows about," Isaac shot back. He turned to the lawman. "Sheriff, which way did he head?" "Tracks point north, but he could be doubling back." Isaac nodded, his expression hard as granite. "Miss Brooks," he said, turning back to her, "I'm offering you shelter at my ranch. It's remote, it's defensible. He'll never think to look for you there." She stared at him, a storm of desperation and suspicion raging inside her. This man, this stranger, was offering her safety. But why? Why would you help me? You don't even know me. "I know enough," Isaac repeated, his voice softer now. "And out here, we don't leave people to face the wolves alone." The sheriff cleared his throat. "It's a good idea, Savannah. Blackwood here is one of the only men in this territory I'd trust with my own life. He's a former Army scout, knows this land like the back of his hand." She looked from the weary sheriff to the intense stranger. Stay here, where Daniels would surely find her. Or trust this man who seemed to appear out of nowhere, right when she needed him most. It wasn't a choice. It was the only option she had left. "I need to get my things," she said, her voice shaking. "5 minutes," Isaac said, his eyes already scanning the dark street outside. "I'll have the horses ready out back." She flew up the stairs to her tiny room. She grabbed a change of clothes, the small derringer she kept under her pillow, and the locket. The locket held the only picture she had of her parents. It was all she had left of her old life. She stuffed it all into a satchel and caught a glimpse of herself in the cracked mirror. The fear in her green eyes was a ghost she thought she had buried. Downstairs, the saloon owner, Mr. Holloway, was waiting. "You come back when this is done, you hear?" he said, his voice rough with concern. "Best barmaid I've ever had." She just nodded, unable to speak. Outside in the cold night air, Isaac was holding the reins of 2 horses, a sturdy chestnut for himself and a smaller mare for her. "Can you ride?" he asked as he tied her satchel to the saddle. "Yes," she said. It had been years, but her father had taught her well. "Good," he said, his voice grim. "We ride hard. Daniels might have friends watching the roads." As they galloped out of town, leaving the small cluster of lights behind, Savannah risked a glance over her shoulder. Willow Creek. It was never meant to be a home, just a place to hide. But in the quiet moments, she had almost let herself believe it could be something more. Now, it was just another town she was fleeing in the dark. The cold air stung her face. The only sound was the rhythmic thunder of hooves on the hard-packed earth. After a few miles, Isaac veered off the main trail, leading them into a dense stand of pines that swallowed them whole, cloaking their path in near-total darkness. They slowed the horses to a walk, the animals picking their way through the trees with care. "How'd you end up in Willow Creek?" Isaac asked, his voice a low rumble in the quiet woods. She hesitated. She had built walls around her past, thick and high. But the directness of his question, the way he looked at her in the slivers of moonlight, it made her want to give him a piece of the truth. "I needed a place to start over," she said. "A place where nobody knew my name." Isaac just nodded, accepting her answer without pushing for more. "I understand that," he said. "Most folks out here are running from something, or someone." "What about you?" she asked, turning the question back on him. Who was this man, this former scout who lived alone and offered shelter to women in trouble? A shadow passed over his face, a flicker of some old pain. "The war changes a man," he said, his voice flat. "Afterward, I couldn't go back home to Virginia. Too many ghosts." He paused. "So I headed west, worked as a scout, saved up, and bought my own piece of land." "You fought for the Confederacy?" The surprise was clear in her voice. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, ma'am. Union, through and through. But my family was from Virginia. It didn't feel right, coming home as a victor to a land full of defeated men." They rode in silence for a long time after that, the moon climbing higher in the ink-black sky. Finally, Isaac pointed toward a distant ridge. "My place is just over that rise. It's not much, but it's peaceful." When they crested the ridge, she saw it. A small cabin, nestled against a meadow. A barn and a corral stood nearby. A creek cut through the property, shining like a silver ribbon in the moonlight. It wasn't just peaceful. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Isaac smiled, the first truly unguarded smile she'd seen from him. "It's home." He helped her down from her horse. Up close, the cabin was small but solid, built with care. A stone chimney stood against one wall, and a covered porch ran along the front. "I'll see to the horses," he said. "Go on inside. There's food in the pantry." The cabin was one room, tidy and sparse, a table and 2 chairs, a small stove, a bookshelf packed with worn books, and a bed in the corner, a colorful quilt folded neatly at its foot. She stood in the middle of the room, feeling the walls close in. Just hours ago, she was in a crowded saloon. Now she was here, miles from anywhere, alone with a man she'd just met. The silence was deafening. When Isaac came back in, he must have seen the tension in her face. "I'll sleep in the barn," he said immediately, grabbing the quilt from the bed. "You take the cabin." "I can't put you out of your own home," she protested. "You're not," he insisted. "I've slept in worse places. Besides, it's just until we figure this out." She was too bone-tired to argue. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling small and inadequate. "Get some rest," he said with a nod. "We'll figure out what's next in the morning." After he left, she sank onto the bed. The reality crashed down on her. Daniels was free. He was hunting her. And she was now utterly dependent on the kindness of a stranger. A stranger with kind eyes, yes, but a stranger all the same. She had learned over and over again not to trust, not to hope. But as she lay down on Isaac's bed, the simple, clean scent of pine wood and smoke surrounding her, a tiny, treacherous thought took root. Maybe this time was different. Maybe this time her instincts hadn't led her into another trap. Morning came with a soft knock on the door. Savannah sat bolt upright, her heart pounding, the unfamiliar room spinning for a second, before the night before came rushing back. "Miss Brooks?" Isaac's voice called through the wood. "I've got breakfast, whenever you're ready." She smoothed her rumpled dress and ran her fingers through her hair, trying to look presentable. When she opened the door, he was standing on the porch, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. The sun was just peeking over the ridge, and a stack of freshly split wood sat by the door. He'd been up for hours. "Hope you slept well," he said, handing her a mug. "Better than I expected," she admitted. The coffee was rich and strong, nothing like the watery swill she served at the saloon. "Made some Johnny cakes and bacon," he said, gesturing to a small fire pit where a cast-iron skillet sizzled. They ate on the porch steps, the silence comfortable. Birds sang in the trees, and a small herd of cattle grazed in the distant meadow. It was so peaceful, it felt like a dream, but she knew the nightmare was still waiting. "So," Isaac said, breaking the silence, "we need to talk about what happens next." The peace shattered. "I can't stay here forever," she said. "No," he agreed, "but you can stay until Daniels is caught. Sheriff Jenkins is a good man. He won't stop looking." "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "Frederick Daniels doesn't give up. He's obsessive." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question she'd been dreading. "What did he do to you, Savannah?" Her first name, spoken so softly, startled her. But she didn't pull away. "You don't have to tell me," he added quickly. "But it might help if I knew what we were up against." She took a deep breath, and the story, the one she had locked away, came pouring out. I was his secretary in St. Louis. At first, he was kind, but then he started paying me attention, unwanted attention. She paused, the memory still sharp as glass. One night, he asked me to stay late. When everyone else was gone, he tried to force himself on me. Isaac's jaw tightened, his knuckles turning white where he gripped his coffee mug. Did he hurt you? I fought back, she whispered. I got away, but not before he... She couldn't say the rest. She just pulled up the sleeve of her dress, revealing a thin white scar on her forearm. He called it a reminder. Isaac's hands clenched into fists. I'm sorry, Savannah. No one should ever... I left that night, she continued, her voice stronger now. I took a train west, but he found me. Kansas City, Topeka, Denver. Every time I started to feel safe, he would just appear. And now, Willow Creek, Isaac finished for her. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. I thought I'd finally gone far enough. Men like Daniels, Isaac said, his voice hard as iron. They don't understand reason. They only understand force. I won't let anyone else get hurt because of me, she said, her old resolve returning. As soon as I'm rested, I'm leaving. Maybe California this time. Running isn't the answer, Isaac said. Sooner or later, you run out of places to go. What other choice do I have? She cried, the desperation clawing at her throat. We stand and fight, he said simply. He looked her right in the eye. You're not alone in this anymore. She looked at him then, really saw him in the morning light, the lines around his eyes from years in the sun, the flecks of silver in his dark hair, a faint scar along his jaw. But it was his eyes that held her. They were as blue as the Wyoming sky and filled with a resolve that made her want to believe. It was a dangerous feeling. Why? She asked, the question that had haunted her all night. Why risk yourself for a stranger? Isaac looked away, toward the distant mountains. Because, he said, his voice barely a whisper, there was a time I needed someone to stand with me, and nobody did. I won't be that man. I won't be the one who looks away. Before she could process what he'd said, a new sound cut through the morning quiet. Hoofbeats, approaching fast. Isaac was on his feet in a second, his hand dropping to the revolver on his hip. Stay here, he ordered in a low voice. Rifles under the bed, ammunition in the drawer. He moved to the edge of the porch, silent as a cat, peering down the trail. Savannah's heart hammered against her ribs. Was it him? Had Daniels found them already? The tension in Isaac's shoulders eased just a fraction. It's the sheriff, he called back to her. Sheriff Jenkins looked exhausted. His horse was lathered in sweat. Blackwood, he greeted with a grim nod. Miss Brooks, glad you're safe. Any news? Isaac asked. Nothing good, the sheriff said, swinging down from his horse. Daniels has hired himself some guns, 3, maybe 4 of them. They're all over town, flashing money, asking about you. Savannah felt her blood run cold. Has anyone talked? Isaac asked. Not yet. Folks in Willow Creek don't like outsiders asking questions, but it's just a matter of time. The kind of money Daniels is offering, someone's tongue is gonna get loose. What about Daniels himself? Sitting in the hotel, the sheriff spat. Bold as brass, he's telling everyone you're his runaway fiancée, that you stole from him. He's a liar, Savannah burst out, anger cutting through her fear. We know that, Jenkins said, but he's being clever. Hasn't broken any laws I can hold him on. Not yet. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. I came to warn you. Stay put. I told everyone I put you on the eastbound stage, hoping he'll take the bait and clear out. And if he doesn't? Savannah asked, her voice small. Then we deal with him here, Isaac said, his voice a low growl. My land, My rules. The sheriff nodded. Blackwood's right. This is the safest place for you. It's remote, defensible, and he's damn good with that gun. He looked at Savannah. We won't let him get to you. As the sheriff mounted up and rode away, a strange new feeling bloomed in Savannah's chest. It felt like hope. She turned to Isaac, who was watching her, his expression unreadable. You still want to run? He asked quietly. She thought about the past year, the endless train rides, the lonely rooms, the constant gnawing fear. She was so tired of running. No, she said, and the word felt solid, real. No more running. Isaac's face broke into a slow, warm smile. Good, he said. Then let's get ready for a fight. But as he turned to walk back into the cabin, Savannah noticed something she hadn't seen before. Tucked into his saddlebag, which he'd left slung over the porch railing, was a folded piece of paper. It was a wanted poster, and the face on it, sketched in stark black ink, was Frederick Daniels. Why did a simple rancher have a wanted poster for the very man hunting her? The days that followed were surreal. A strange, tense calm settled over the ranch. Isaac taught her things: how to mend a fence, how to clean and load his Winchester rifle, how to shoot, not just with the small derringer she carried, but with the heavy revolver he gave her. He was a patient teacher, his hands firm and gentle as he corrected her stance, his voice calm as he taught her to control her breathing. In the evenings they talked. She learned he was the son of a Pennsylvania blacksmith who had seen too much of death in the war and had come west to find life again. He learned about her childhood in Missouri, about the fever that took her parents, about her dream of one day opening a small bakery of her own. You could do that here, he'd said one evening, as they watched the sun bleed crimson and gold across the sky. Willow Creek is growing. It could use a good bakery. He was making it easy to forget she was a prisoner here, hiding from a monster. He was making it easy to trust him. But the wanted poster haunted her. She hadn't asked him about it. She was afraid of the answer. What if he wasn't who he said he was? What if this was just another, more elaborate trap? On the fourth day, she couldn't take it anymore. While he was out checking on the cattle, she went to his saddlebag. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the poster. It offered a $500 reward for information leading to the arrest of Frederick Daniels for fraud and smuggling in 3 territories. It wasn't issued by a sheriff. It was issued by the Pinkerton Detective Agency. This quiet rancher, this former Army scout, was a bounty hunter. He had been hunting Daniels all along. Their meeting in the saloon hadn't been a coincidence. He had been looking for her. The sense of betrayal was a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. He had lied to her. He had used her as bait. The kindness, the gentle smiles, the shared stories. Was it all an act? She felt the old familiar walls slam back into place around her heart. She was a fool to have ever let them down. When he rode back in, she was waiting on the porch, the poster clutched in her hand. He saw it, and his face fell. He swung down from his horse, his movements slow, weary. "Savannah," he began. "Was any of it real?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Or am I just part of the bounty?" "It wasn't like that," he said, taking a step toward her. She took a step back. "I was tracking Daniels, yes, for the Pinkertons, but not for the reason you think. When I heard he was harassing a woman, that he'd followed her to Willow Creek, I had to see for myself." "Why?" she demanded. "Why should you care?" He stopped, his blue eyes filled with a pain that looked so real it had to be. "Because the man I failed to save, the one I told you about, he had a daughter. He made me promise I'd look out for her if anything ever happened to him. I lost track of her after he died. I've been looking for her for years." He took another step, his voice dropping so low she had to strain to hear it. "His name was Thomas Brooks. He was your father, Savannah. We served together." The world tilted on its axis. Her father. The locket around her neck suddenly felt heavy as lead. It couldn't be true. It was another lie, another trick. "My father died of a fever," she said, her voice shaking. "No," Isaac said gently. "He died in a skirmish a year after the war ended, working as a scout. He saved my life that day, and I made him a promise. It was too much. A bounty hunter. A promise to a dead father she barely remembered. She felt like she was drowning, and that's when they heard it. Not hoofbeats this time. A single, sharp crack of a rifle shot from the ridge overlooking the cabin. It was followed by another. The time for talk was over. Daniels had found them. "Get down!" Isaac roared, shoving her off the porch and behind a large boulder, as a third shot kicked up a spray of dirt right where she had been standing. "He found us," Isaac said grimly, his revolver already in his hand. "Stay low. We can't make it to the cabin. We have to get to those trees." "How many?" she gasped, her mind still reeling from his revelation. "At least two," he said, peering around the rock. "One on the ridge, another moving in from the east. He's trying to flank us." He looked at her, his eyes blazing with intensity. "I'll draw their fire. When I do, you run for that stand of pines. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you." "You have to. You're faster. I'll be right behind you," he promised. Before she could argue, he fired 3 quick shots toward the ridge. "Now! Go!" he yelled. She ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, branches whipping at her face, her lungs burning. She heard the crack of the rifle from the ridge, and the sharp retort of Isaac's revolver answering it. She was almost there, almost to the safety of the trees, when a new shot rang out from a different direction. She turned just in time to see Isaac stumble and fall, clutching his side. "Isaac!" she screamed. A wave of pure, cold rage washed over her. She raised the revolver he had given her and fired toward the second shooter, the sound deafening. She didn't hit anything, but it made him duck for cover. It was enough. Isaac scrambled the last few feet into the pines. "I'm all right," he gasped, leaning against a tree trunk. Blood was already seeping through his shirt. Just a graze. It might have been a graze, but it was bleeding badly. "We need to get to the cabin," she said, tearing a strip from her petticoat to press against the wound. "They'll be watching it," he said through gritted teeth. Her mind raced. "You told me you had an old line shack," she said. "On the north end of the property." "How far?" "A mile, but it's across open ground." "Not if we follow the creek," she said, her mind suddenly clear. "The banks are high. It'll give us cover." He looked at her, a flicker of surprise and respect in his pain-filled eyes. That might just work, but we have to leave the horses." "Better than leaving our lives," she said firmly. "Can you walk?" He pushed himself to his feet, wincing. "I can do more than walk," he grunted. "Lead the way, Miss Brooks." They stumbled through the trees to the creek, the icy water a shock as they scrambled down the muddy bank. They moved as fast as they could, half crouching, the sound of the running water masking their footsteps. Every few minutes, Savannah would glance at Isaac. His face was pale, but his jaw was set, his eyes constantly scanning the ridge above them. He never complained. "Tell me about the shack," she said, trying to keep his mind off the pain. "Built it my first winter," he said, his voice tight. "Got caught in a blizzard. Lived in it for a week while I finished the main cabin. Keep it stocked, just in case." It felt like an eternity, but finally, they saw it. A tiny, crude cabin, almost invisible against a rocky hillside. There was no sign it had been discovered. Inside, she helped him to a simple cot. The place was small, but just as he'd said, it was stocked. A medical kit, tins of food, matches, a lantern. She lit the lantern, keeping the flame low. Lesson learned that first winter, he mumbled as he tried and failed to pull off his bloody shirt. She helped him, her hands gentle as she peeled the damp fabric away from his skin. The wound was a long, ugly gash across his ribs. She cleaned it with whiskey from a flask in the kit, her movements sure and steady. Her father had taught her this too. A woman should know how to stitch a wound as well as a seam, he used to say. Wise man, your father, Isaac murmured, watching her. Once he was bandaged, she made him rest. As night fell, a deep cold settled in. She built a small, smokeless fire in the tiny stove. I'll take first watch, she insisted, seeing the exhaustion on his face. He wanted to argue, but he was too weak. Wake me in 4 hours, he conceded, and was asleep in moments. She sat by the single window, revolver in her lap, and watched the moonlit landscape. Was it true? Everything he'd said? Her father? A promise? It felt like a story from a dime novel, too fantastic to be real. And yet, the way he looked at her, the way he'd thrown himself in front of a bullet for her. He groaned in his sleep, his face twisted in pain. Without thinking, she went to him, placing her cool hand on his forehead. He wasn't feverish. That was a good sign. His eyes snapped open. They were lucid, intense, and they were looking right at her. Sorry, she whispered, pulling her hand away. I didn't mean to wake you. Wasn't really asleep, he said, sitting up slowly. Thinking about Daniels, about you. He looked at her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. About how someone can go through what you have and still be so strong, so kind. I'm not strong, she said, looking away. I've just been running. Sometimes running is the bravest thing a person can do, he said softly. You survived. Their eyes met, and in the flickering lantern light, something shifted. The lies, the secrets, they fell away. All that was left was the truth. He was the man who had promised to protect her. And he had. We need a plan, she said, breaking the spell. We can't just wait here for them to find us. Isaac nodded, his expression turning serious. They'll search the cabin first, then they'll fan out. But they don't know this land. I do. That's our advantage. A desperate, wild idea began to form in her mind. What if we don't hide? She said. What if we hunt them? A slow, dangerous smile spread across Isaac's face. I like the way you think, Miss Brooks. They spent the next hour planning, their voices low and urgent. They would use the terrain, their knowledge, and the element of surprise. They would turn the tables. As dawn approached, a thick fog rolled in, blanketing the land in a ghostly white shroud. It was the perfect cover. They moved like ghosts through the mist, circling back toward the main cabin. From the edge of the trees they could see them. 2 men ransacking the cabin, a third standing guard outside. 3 of them, Isaac whispered. Daniels must be somewhere else, waiting. Good, Savannah whispered back. Let's give them something to report. The plan was terrifyingly simple. Isaac would create a diversion at the barn. While they were distracted, Savannah would sneak into the root cellar at the back of the property. Isaac had told her he kept something there. An old buffalo gun. A massive .50 caliber rifle that could stop a charging bull in its tracks. Be careful, he said, squeezing her hand. His touch sent a jolt through her. You too, she replied. She slipped away, a shadow in the fog. As she reached the earthen mound of the root cellar, she heard it. A loud crash from the barn, followed by angry shouts. Then, gunfire. The diversion was working. The 2 men from the cabin were running toward the barn, leaving the 3rd man alone. She opened the heavy cellar door, and slipped inside. The gun was there, leaning against the wall. It was heavier than she could have imagined, a true monster of a rifle. She managed to load a single, massive cartridge into the chamber and hauled it back outside. The firefight at the barn was intense. Isaac was pinned down, exchanging shots with the two men who had taken cover behind a water trough. Savannah rested the heavy barrel of the buffalo gun on the branch of a tree, took a deep breath, and aimed not at the men, but at their cover. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, nearly knocking her off her feet. The sound was like a cannon blast. The bullet hit the metal trough, and the world exploded in a shower of splintered wood and gushing water. The two men, suddenly exposed, scrambled for new cover. Isaac didn't hesitate. A shot from his revolver sent one man staggering back, clutching his shoulder. The other broke and ran toward the cabin. Savannah dropped the big gun and drew her own revolver, turning her attention to the third man. He was moving to help his friend when she fired, not at him, but at the wooden porch support next to his head. The wood splintered, sending him diving to the ground. Isaac burst out from the barn, advancing, firing with calm, deadly precision. The tide had turned. They were winning, and that's when they heard it. The thunder of more horses. Through a break in the fog, she saw him. Frederick Daniels riding hard, with two more gunmen flanking him. 5 of them, not 3. The odds had just turned impossible. "Isaac!" she yelled. He saw them too and broke for the cover of a low stone wall. Savannah tried to circle around to join him, but one of the new men spotted her and opened fire, pinning her behind a tree. "Savannah!" Daniel's voice, slick and venomous, echoed through the clearing. "Come on out, my dear. This has gone on long enough. Show yourself, and I might just let your cowboy friend live." "Don't listen to him!" Isaac shouted from behind the wall. "He's a liar!" A shot rang out from Daniel's position. Isaac cried out in pain. "Next one goes through his heart!" Daniel screamed, his voice cracking with rage. "You have 1 minute!" Savannah closed her eyes. She couldn't let Isaac die for her. She just couldn't. But surrendering to Daniels was a fate worse than death. Her hand tightened on her revolver. 1 bullet left. Maybe it was enough. Before she could make her choice, a new sound cut through the chaos. More hoofbeats, a lot more. She peered around the tree, and her heart stopped. It was Sheriff Jenkins, with a dozen armed townsmen riding behind him. A posse. "Daniels!" the sheriff's voice boomed. "Drop your weapons! You're surrounded!" For a moment, chaos reigned. 2 of Daniel's men threw down their guns immediately. Daniels himself just stared, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. In that single moment of hesitation, Isaac made his move. Wounded and bleeding, he launched himself over the stone wall and tackled Daniels clean off his horse. They hit the ground hard, a tangle of flailing limbs. Daniel's pistol went flying. Savannah rushed forward, scooped up the fallen gun, and pointed it squarely at Daniel's chest as Isaac pinned him to the ground. "It's over, Frederick," she said, her voice shaking but clear as a bell. "You've lost." His eyes, full of pure hatred, bored into hers. "You think this is over? You'll always be looking over your shoulder. You'll never be free of me." "Yes, she will," Isaac grunted, his voice deadly calm. "Because you're never seeing the outside of a prison cell again." The sheriff and his men swarmed the clearing, cuffing Daniels and his hired guns. "Saw the smoke from your little war halfway to town," Jenkins explained, his face a mixture of relief and awe. "Figured you two could use a hand." "Your timing," Isaac said, wincing as he got to his feet, "is impeccable, Sheriff." His shirt was soaked with fresh blood. "You need a doctor," Savannah said, rushing to his side. "So do you," he replied, nodding at her arm. She looked down and saw a long, bloody graze she hadn't even felt. As they led Daniels away, he was still screaming threats, his face purple with rage. Savannah watched him go and felt nothing, just a profound, bone-deep weariness. It was over. It was finally, truly over. "He can't hurt you anymore," Isaac said softly, as if reading her mind. "You're free. Free." The word echoed in her mind as the town doctor stitched her arm and bandaged Isaac's shoulder back at the cabin. The cabin was a wreck, bullet holes scarring the walls, but it felt like a sanctuary. As night fell and the last of the posse rode back to town, they were alone again. They sat on the porch, not talking, just watching the first stars appear. "What will happen to him?" she finally asked. "Jenkins says with all the witnesses, he'll be locked away for the rest of his life," Isaac replied. She nodded, a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying lifting from her soul. "And what happens now?" she whispered. "To me?" He turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious in the twilight. "That's up to you, Savannah. You can go anywhere, do anything. Ooh, you get to choose your own life now." "And what if my path," she said, her heart pounding, "leads me to stay right here, in Willow Creek?" A slow smile spread across his face. "Then I'd say Willow Creek is a very lucky town." She took a deep breath. "And what about you, Isaac? Would you be lucky to have me?" He took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping gently around hers. "I think you already know the answer to that." "I'd like to hear you say it," she whispered. He looked at her, and all the pain, all the fear, all the running of the last year melted away in the warmth of his gaze. "Savannah Brooks," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "These last few days have been the most dangerous of my life, and the most alive I've felt since the war. If you chose to stay, not just in Willow Creek, but here, with me, I would be the luckiest man in the entire Wyoming Territory." Tears filled her eyes, but for the first time in forever, they were tears of joy. "I've been running for so long," she said. "I'm not sure I know how to stay." "We can learn together," he said, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "Day by day." "I've been hurt, Isaac," she admitted, the last of her fear finding a voice. "In ways that don't show." His expression softened. "Then let me be gentle," he promised. "Let me show you that not all men are like him. Let me earn your trust, no matter how long it takes." And in the starlight, surrounded by the quiet of the mountains, Savannah leaned in and kissed him. It was a kiss that tasted of gunpowder and relief, of endings and new beginnings. When they pulled apart, a real, unguarded smile spread across her face. "Day by day," she agreed. In the weeks that followed, a new life began to bloom. Isaac's wounds healed. She helped him with the ranch, finding a surprising joy in the simple hard work. He helped her draw up plans for her bakery, hauling lumber from the mill in his wagon. The town embraced her, no longer a mysterious newcomer, but one of their own. News came that Daniels had been sentenced to 20 years of hard labor. The threat was gone for good. One warm evening, as they sat on the porch of the cabin that was now their home, Isaac took her hand. "The ranch is doing well," he said, a strange nervousness in his voice. "The bakery's almost ready to open. Seems to me it's time we made things official." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple silver ring with a single pearl. He slid off the porch step and onto one knee. "I'm not a man for fancy words, Savannah, but I know I want to build a life with you. To wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep with you every night. To face whatever comes, together." Tears streamed down her face as he looked up at her, his heart in his eyes. "Savannah Brooks, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, the easiest word she had ever spoken. "Yes, Isaac Blackwood, I will marry you." They were married on a crisp October day, under a sky as blue as Isaac's eyes. The whole town came. The bakery opened the next week and was an instant success. They added a new room to the cabin. Life, which had once been a thing to be survived, became a thing to be cherished. As the first snow of winter began to fall, Savannah stood in the doorway, watching Isaac chop wood. She placed a hand on her stomach, where a new life, a secret she would share with him tonight, was just beginning to grow. She thought of the long, dark road that had brought her here. She thought of the fear, the loneliness, the despair, and she thought of the quiet stranger in the saloon who had offered her shelter and shown her the way home. He looked up then, as if he could feel her watching him, and his face broke into that smile that still made her heart leap. He set down the axe and walked toward her. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, wrapping her in his arms. She leaned into his warmth, into the safety she had never thought she would find. "I'm thinking about beginnings," she said, "and how sometimes the most beautiful ones come right after the darkest endings." He kissed her forehead. "Well, I think our story is just getting started." And as the snow fell softly around them, blanketing the world in clean, quiet white, she knew he was right. If you enjoyed this story of a dark past and a hard-won future, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are always more shadows to explore, and more stories of justice waiting in the dark.